Peace. Welcome to another episode of More Than a Coincidence, which is a new series underneath the umbrella of my podcast, which is called, of course, the Ruling Class Podcast. For those of you who have been here, I want to say I appreciate your support. For those of you who are new, welcome. And I ask that you like, share, and please hit that subscribe button and notification bell. And check out some of my older content as well. I work very hard on these videos, and when you do that, it really helps the channel. Thank you. I have questions. Is it more than a coincidence that the same group that is said to have quote-unquote forced America to confront the issues in the ghettos also promoted hate, misogyny, violence, and drug use to the so-called black community? Is it more than a coincidence that despite N.W.A. claiming to be the voice for those living in the hoods around America, they were still protested by both African Americans and the police force? Is it more than a coincidence that following the groundbreaking birth of both N.W.A. and gangsta rap, the hip-hop music scene as a whole has since been a consistent replica of the very same type of dark lyrics, messages, and imagery? Join me in this episode as we both cover and uncover the open secret about the originators of gangsta rap, N.W.A. Eric Wright, or better known by his stage name Eazy-E, was born on September 7, 1963 in Compton, California to parents Richard Wright, who was a postal worker, and his mother Kathy Wright, who was a grade school administrator. Speaking of school, Eazy-E would eventually drop out of high school and become a drug dealer for a period of time to make money that would later be used to co-found a label, Ruthless Records, with longtime music industry insider Jerry Heller. Eazy-E would begin as a solo artist, but after not seeing much success, in 1987 he will team up with two other young men from the region, a member of the rap group CIA, or Crew in Action, O'Shea Jackson, or better known as Ice Cube, and a member at the time of the world-class Wrecking Crew, Andre Young, or better known as Dr. Dre. And the three of them would begin crafting songs for Eazy-E's label. At Dr. Dre's suggestion, Eazy-E would agree to sign the New York group HBO to Ruthless Records, but when the group turned down Ice Cube and Dr. Dre's song, The Boys in the Hood, Eazy-E, with some coaching from his partners, recorded the song himself. This led to Eazy-E's first single, which turned out to be a hit. Later that same year, Arabian Prince, DJ Yella, and MC Ren would join the group, and they would eventually release their first album as a group calling themselves N-Words with Attitude, or N.W.A. and the Posse, which would peak at number 39 on Billboard magazine's top R&B and hip-hop chart. This album included songs such as the single Panic Zone, a restyled version of Boys in the Hood, 8-Ball, and Dope Man. After the release of N.W.A. and the Posse, Ice Cube left the group for a year to study drafting at the Phoenix Institute of Technology. When he returned in 1988, the group recorded and completed Eazy-E's solo album, Eazy Does It, while Dr. Dre and DJ Yella did most of the producing. MC Ren and Ice Cube wrote most of the lyrics. Also during the same year, the infamous and groundbreaking album debuts that many people consider as the album to pioneer gangsta rap as we all know it today, that being Straight Outta Compton. This album was said to be quote-unquote reality rap that offers uncensored thoughts on women, drug dealing, gang activity, and police brutality in a way in which it had never been shared before. It was said that this album quote-unquote forced America to confront the issues in the ghettos due to the group highlighting all the wrongs and injustices that take place in the black community. But what if I told you that N.W.A. and the gangsta rap movement did more than just quote-unquote highlight the wrongs and injustices in the black community? What if I told you that N.W.A. used gangsta rap, a subgenre of hip-hop, the same way many artists today use hip-hop as a whole, as a means to glorify the very things that destroy families and communities while also profiting from it at the same time? That there was and has always been a much more darker and sinister agenda attached to the music genre that isn't just a coincidence. Many people don't even know that N.W.A. actually did not invent the aggressive and unapologetic style of rap that many accredit them for. A rap group by the name of Public Enemy had already helped redefine the genre by ushering in aggressively pro-black raps that were intelligent, socially aware, and politically charged. So what changed with N.W.A.? What made them stand out from Public Enemy? I believe that it's only right if we go back to 1988 and take a look at the state of the country and the impact of NWA in gangsta rap following its debut. What was happening in 1988, you may ask? Let's see. The unemployment rate had dropped to 5.3% that year, which was the lowest it had ever been since 1974. That's well over a decade. There was the very controversial topic within government surrounding the legalization of abortion. AIDS was spreading rapidly across the world. The crack epidemic was destroying many so-called black neighborhoods. George H.W. Bush was elected as 41st President of the United States, and current President Ronald Reagan launched the war on drugs by signing a bill providing the death penalty for murderous drug traffickers. Not to mention, the country was not far removed from the civil rights movement that was the epitome of fighting about the day-to-day struggles for the average so-called black person in this country due to severe poverty, racism, prejudice, stereotypes, etc. So what does NWA decide to do during this tumultuous time? Instead of coming with an intellectually aggressive approach similar to Public Enemy to raise awareness to the problems within the community, NWA decided to drop an album that literally celebrated the violence of gangs and drugs that turned neighborhoods into war zones, with lyrics such as "Straight Outta Compton," "Crazy Mother Alpha named Ice Cube from the gang called N-Words with Attitudes," "When I'm called off, I got a sawed off," "Squeeze the trigger and bodies are hauled off," and many more lyrics just like it. There's absolutely nothing about these lyrics that are quote-unquote raising awareness. In fact, they were doing the opposite. They are blatantly and explicitly glorifying killing other people, violence and destruction, while simultaneously painting a negative perception of so-called black males, not just in American society, but the world. So much for the day-to-day struggles for the average so-called black man. So much for the civil rights era that was literally about fighting against racism, stereotypes, and the lack of resources made available to black and browns in this country. Lyrics like these were counterproductive and didn't help in any way. NWA decided to drop an album that was filled with sexist, misogynistic, homophobic, and hateful messages, with lyrics like, "You need an N-word with money so you get a dope man," "Juice that fool for as much as you can," "She likes his car and he get with her," "Got a black eye cause the dope man hit her," "Let that slide and you pay it no mind," "Find that he's slapping you all the time, but that's okay cause he's so rich and you ain't nothing but a dope man's," and many more lyrics just like it. There's absolutely nothing about these lyrics that quote-unquote raise awareness. In fact, they were doing the opposite. They are blatantly and explicitly encouraging and exploiting sexism, woman abuse, hateful rhetoric towards gay men and women, selling and doing drugs, glorifying money, while simultaneously painting a negative perception of so-called black women, not just in American society, but the world. Women, particularly women of color, have been viewed as sex objects since the days of slavery. The old myth that it is acceptable to mistreat women recreated itself through gangster rap music. The type of harsh lyrics in these songs were produced with the sole intent of disgracing women of color. I would love for anyone to argue against this. The subject matter of these songs deals directly with situations that portray women as not having any value and only being sex tools for society. So much for the fight for women's rights. So much for helping people of color with the war on drugs. So much for the crack epidemic. Lyrics like these were counterproductive and didn't help in any way. Then comes the extremely controversial and disruptive record, F the Police. Back in 1988, it was said that this song was a quote-unquote protest song against police brutality and racial profiling within the so-called black community. Something that was and still a very real thing. Do I believe that this was the agenda of the record? Yes, I do. I 100% believe that there was and has always been racial profiling and police brutality within the so-called black community, even today, absolutely. But it was also said that MTV allegedly denied Ruthless Records' request to have the song aired on their network because the lyrics and messages were too negative and violent. The thing is, we only found out about this because it was aired on national news. If you don't want people to hear the raunchy, explicit, and violent lyrics from NWA, then why would you put it on national television that you denied them the platform to play their songs? This, I believe, was a marketing strategy, one that worked really well, I might add. Because the psychology behind this is that once you air this on the news, with everything that's going on in the country at the time, You in turn make people more curious and question why it is that MTV turned down these quote-unquote black men who just wanted to protest against the ills within the black community. People would also remember that MTV didn't want to play Michael Jackson's music at one point either. They played on the emotions and psychological traumas of not only so-called black people, but also whites as well. Because if you notice, literally right after this, NWA was in interviews of radio stations owned by the same companies that owned the labels, promoting the same nonsense that they promoted within their music, claiming that they were just speaking to what was happening within the communities, which in turn hit all the right emotional buttons of many so-called black people in ghettos to rally behind NWA even more. This, once again, was a brilliant marketing strategy, because by doing this, the actual lyrics of the music didn't really matter as much anymore. The content of the music bypassed all defensive triggers of the conscious brain, because now you have more people focused on quote-unquote black men who is just trying to share their message without the white power structures interfering or preventing them from doing so. How do I know this is true? The same way you know it's true too, because any person with a conscious mind would agree that the lyrics of these records are divisive, disrespectful, misogynistic, and full of violence and destruction. You will be able to analyze the lyrics and content of the music with a clear mind, to know that there is clearly something else going on here that is wrong. Yet this is not the popular message that you hear when NWA is referred to most times. Is that more than a coincidence? Another brilliant marketing strategy was the confusion NWA and gangsta rap helped to create. What do I mean? One song, they're talking about express yourself and portraying themselves as if they are just exercising their right to freedom of speech. Then, the very next song, they are full force glorifying the same things that destroys lives. And it didn't just stop with them. Artists like Tupac is notorious for doing the very same thing. He'd go from a Keep Your Head Up, which is supposed to be a quote-unquote feminist anthem for women and pro-choice, but then the very next song is I Get Around, which was an entire song and video literally exploiting women in the most misogynistic way. It's the epitome of confusion. Is this just a coincidence? It was all Masonic in nature, as I believe Tupac was not only connected to the Masons, but was arguably hip-hop's biggest industry plant. If you would like to see an open secret about Tupac, please comment Tupac below. If 50 people comment Tupac, that will be one of my next videos. I also believe there was another agenda behind the record F the Police as well. My personal opinion is that this song was strategically orchestrated by Jerry Heller, Eazy-E, and the record label to stir more controversy and destruction within the so-called black community for the sole advantage of record sales. They knew by touching on these topics, it would attract more attention, with lyrics such as F the Police coming straight from the underground, a young N-word got it bad cause I'm brown, and not the other color, so police think that they have the authority to kill a minority. How does these lyrics help so-called black and brown people in any way? Now, I want to state that, being a so-called black man within this country, the song is very catchy. When I listen to the record, I feel the pain within the record. It's very creative the way the song was put together, but the problem is that it's creatively destructive. Yes, this record did highlight or quote-unquote raise awareness to police brutality against black and brown people, but it also made life that much harder for those very same people. Threatening to fight and kill police officers? That's what you decide to do? This song did several damaging things. The first thing it did was created this narrative and enforced the stereotype that all so-called black people felt this exact same aggressive way about police officers. This couldn't be any further from the truth. What many people don't know is that this album and this song was actually protested by many people, including African Americans, when it came out, from fans, social activists, radio hosts, and even politicians. There were several people who did not agree with this approach of voicing the frustration of systemic racism and injustices within this country. Which leads me to the second damaging thing this record did. It stereotyped and painted the narrative that all police officers were racist and crooked. While I won't dispute that there were and are still currently many police officers in this country who do fit that description, the truth is that many of them do not. And probably the most damaging impact of this record was the relationship or lack thereof it helped facilitate between police officers and so-called black and brown people in real life, in real communities. This record encouraged, motivated, and enticed the idea that people should hate all police officers and to even harm them. I would even argue that it also indirectly encouraged, motivated, and enticed all white police officers who were not crooked, but also did not have much experience with the black community, to view the black community in a particular way because of these popular lyrics from N.W.A. I believe all of this was intentional. Once again, while I understand the plight and fight against police brutality and social injustice even in 2022, I do not understand this method of quote-unquote fighting against it. Even though there were some who did not call the police prior to N.W.A. due to mistreatment from the police, N.W.A. encouraged many more so-called black and brown people to not call the police even when they needed the help. And when they did encounter the police, there was very little trust on either side. Is N.W.A. responsible for all of this by themselves? No, that's not the argument I'm making at all. The argument I am making is that gangsta rap was and has always been gangsta trap. This music was strategically designed and created to make the so-called black community become and remain trapped in this destructive reality of what an aspired life should look like, to feel like these artists were a voice for them fighting for the cause, as if this music was a demonstration of quote-unquote black culture. Many people couldn't see this at the time, when in reality, this has never been the culture of so-called black people. It's not a lifestyle anyone should pursue, but to try their best to escape from. Many people listening and watching this right now may say that it's just music, and at the end of the day, each individual should be held accountable for their own actions and that music alone can't be blamed. While this is partly true, it is also ignorant and just plain wrong to denounce the impact that music has on young people's developing brains. I'm also under the belief that music is the only thing in the world that can enter a person's subconscious brain without their permission. If you place these artists in front of cameras as they flaunt guns, jewelry, money, and half-naked women that wear makeup, fake hair, and most times even fake bodies, it would not only affect young men, but also young women in a negative manner as to how they view themselves and the way of life. For those of you who are still in denial, answer these 3 simple questions for me, and whatever you do, try your very best not to say the words quote-unquote I don't know. Come with a solid answer that's better than what I presented within this video. Is it just a coincidence that despite many saying that N.W.A. and gangsta rap was supposedly a socially and politically charged movement through music for black people against racist white power structures, yet everything that N.W.A. shared was literally on platforms owned, wait for it, by powerful white people? Is it just a coincidence that the entire genre of hip-hop today is predominantly a spitting image of the same 5 elements of gangsta rap? Killing so-called black people, using women, doing drugs, selling drugs, and worshiping materialism. Yet our people, but especially our children, are told to praise and admire these people. Is all of this just a coincidence? I don't believe it is. Thank you for watching the video. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment who or what you'd like me to make a video on next. I believe it is not only my responsibility, but many others' responsibility to unapologetically raise awareness and speak truth to light to the best of our ability, despite how people may feel about it. If you notice evil and choose to not speak on it, please understand that this makes you a part of the problem and not the solution. Respectfully, there is no in between. All praise be to the Most High. The truth is all that there is, and that's not a coincidence. I have questions. Do you?